And I was just thinking about like what I tell myself to get over rejection is that like every time I'm on Grinder, I get rejected all the fucking time. And I don't know why. The old Bryan, the old 9 to 5, and that was pleasing people, but that didn't satisfy you. And now you need to please yourself, which is probably going to ruffle some feathers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's the question in there?
I don't really know. I just, I would just say, I was just talking. How do you know that is the devil on your shoulder versus the angel on your shoulder?
Boy, am I not a good resource to answer that question?
Do you ever think like, what happens if you get that dream business of yours and you're still not happy? We are started. We are here. Well, welcome. I don't really have an intro other than, my name's Cayman. You're listening to Kurious, and today's guest is my friend Bryan. But I texted you and I was telling you that I was like super nervous for this conversation. But now when I was in the shower, I was like, I'm actually really excited. I don't know what has gotten over me or what changed, but I think I'm getting excited for this. And I have a clue of why, but I have that saved down in the later notes of the pod. But yeah, I want this, it's okay. So let's just, me, I just like to start. So let's just start.
Yeah.
Everything's falling. I remember I texted you back in December of 2022, like right before I was going to launch my podcast. And I was like, I want you back for the season finale of like season 2. And it's funny because we're technically 9 months in and I already have you back, which means like things change and plans change. And I'm learning to go with the flow. But it is, if you would have told me that you would have been here this soon, I would have been like, wow, like what happened? I failed. But there are things that are right after you that is, I know this is going to sound so gay, but like is showing me that I am not failing. So it's interesting how you set out for a plan and then things change and then I guess you get what you want, but it's not coming in the way that you planned for it to come. And I'm learning to just go with the flow. And one of the notes that I have is, by the time this comes out, I'll be 30. And I have a plan for my 30s. And I also have a plan for this podcast for the next year. And I want to have more fun. And that's going to mean a lot. So we can get into that. But it's interesting because I wanted to talk about our year, mine and yours, because I remember you told me when you listened to your podcast that you heard growth. And I've seen growth from you. And I just wanted to talk about that. And just talk about our recap, talk about what we learned, what we haven't learned. And when I called you that one day because so-and-so gave me shitty advice, I took some notes from that too. But first of all, how are you doing? How's life? How's Bryan?
So yeah, I'm doing good. I feel like I'm finally turning this corner where there's been like, well, let me start at a different spot. So back when you messaged me in like December and were like, hey, I'm going to have you on the second time, I was like, oh boy, I need to go back and listen to the first episode that I was in. And I remember being like really nervous going in because it's like, man, that even though it wasn't that long ago, like you say, it's 9 months at this point, it felt like so much has happened since then. Like that's probably the most condensed amount of growth I'll ever see in my life is kind of how I feel about it. And the way you're tackling growth too, it seems like that might be true for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was worried that I was going to say something back then and forgot about that. Be like, oh, am I such like a different person now that that's not either going to apply or not what I mean anymore. Mm-hmm. And listened to it, and it was great. Like I listened to it through that lens, and was like, everything's good, everything's fine. And then I actually circled back and listened to it again, like 4 weeks later, and looking at it from a different lens, because I remembered I had said a bunch of things I was going to try to do this year, like get more personal on social media and like share, like be more me, right? And like I was a little disappointed in the progress I had made there. Yeah. And so I think it's cool just that we're doing it again already, just from like an accountability standpoint from myself. I hopefully you feel that way too, but like, I'm doing good. Like, I think I was really positive in that last one. And then I spent a really long time in like a cave of just like scared, fear, like facing my fears every day, like being overwhelmed almost every day, and just like really dark, heavy places. And I can even like look back and be like, well, all of that was supposed to happen and be there. I also feel a little bad about like the relationships I have in life, and I was always bringing that energy to the table, and I still am in a lot of ways, but just like that was heavy. Like
Mhm,
lots of stuff were going on, and I feel like I'm finally getting ready to turn that corner. And just like
mhm,
exactly what you said, I'm ready for this year to be more fun
mhm,
because I wasn't able to have as much fun as I wanted to this last
mhm.
year.
Yeah, you said, yeah, I remember when I texted you, you're like, "Are you cooking something up?" Because I was like, "I want you to, it's gonna take," I thought it was gonna take forever for, like, at least I thought we won't be here until, like, 2024 of August. And so you're like,
Mhm.
"What's the theme? Like, are you cooking something up?" And I'm like, "No, I'm baking." Like, I'm thinking of something because I know you watched The Great British Bake Off. And when you bake, you can't really rush things. You have to take your time and you have to be meticulous and you have to have everything perfect, which is funny because I think going back to this having fun theme, which we'll get to later, I have to not be perfect in order to do that, in order to have fun. But I think the analogy of baking is like what I was hoping for with if we had this later is that I would come with all of this information and like bake and marinate it. But then, time has passed and things have changed. But I also liked how you said like you're bringing negative things into friends because that's something or like with your friend group, because that's something I was going to talk about too, which we can start is I just hung out with one of my friends. I won't name who, but if she's listening, she would know. And after a couple of wines later and a beer, beer later, she confessed to me that her and other people of my friend group feel left out of this process, and that broke my
Mm,
heart. And a lot of my friends in the same breath want me to be more comfortable promoting and being like, I have a podcast. And so
mm,
I like having you because when you're talking about like, oh, you're bringing this negative energy, it sucks to like, I feel like, well, I don't feel like it, but what my friends are reporting to me is that they're getting some negative energy as well. And it's interesting is like how I obviously am not aware of that because that's not my mindset. And you probably weren't aware of that because that's what your mindset. But it's funny how we embark on these journeys that, and we talked about this on the phone too, how you get so stressed out and how it's like affecting your friends when you well I'll speak for myself. When I did this, it was to help me out and to get me out of a stressful moment and get me out of dark times. But then the consequences are the reaction of that is like I'm shunning my friends away or they feel like that they're not involved. And so that kind of sucks. How do you navigate not bringing stress or that negative energy, I would say, into your friend spaces?
I think, yeah, I guess I'm not. I think I'm at a point now, like just I'm not really trying to navigate it. I'm just trying to be more accepting of it, right? Because like I think, I mean, obviously, I feel bad sometimes, like when I bring that heaviness. Like I've been going through a big struggle. This big last project that I did opened my eyes to a lot of like my blind spots. Like,
Mhm.
and I'll use the word trauma, and like really, that's what's I'm being faced head on with. Where for so long I was this engineer who was doing a specific job and like was living a life that was different than what filled my cup. And so now I'm at this point where I finally have like that dark period to me. I'm trying to explain it like metaphorically. Like if I'm like a big ship in the
Mhm.
ocean, right? Like a huge like cruise ship that takes a while to turn. It just feels like I started to worry. Like I realized I wasn't going the direction in life that I wanted
Mhm.
to. And so now the worry comes in. And so like I worry a lot. And I think that's you and I like relate a lot about like the anxieties and the worries and like let's wrap up every possible thing that could go wrong.
Yes.
Worry is really good because tells you that currently the way you're headed might not be the way you need to go.
Mhm.
And so then it took a really long time, that dark period, for that ship to like kind of turn the right direction. And now I catch myself continuing to worry,
Mhm.
even though the ship's pointed relatively the right direction. And that's what a lot of my heaviness is.
Mhm.
It's like I'm not we got the ship steered, but now let's focus on some of the other tasks on the ship,
Yeah.
not just the driving.
Yeah.
And so I'm in that place where I'm pointed the right direction. And so I'm really looking at it as I went through this period where I'm trying to be something completely different than I've been for my entire life. And I have to change a lot about myself, or at least have to realize what I had already previously changed to fit that other life that I was living, and unlearn all that. And that sucks.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that because on the notes I have embracing the new journey. And I
Hmm.
think that's exactly what I was going through in my own way. I also have like the voices in your head, and it kind of like sums up like what you were talking about or what I was hearing, what you were saying is that, yeah, I worry and I have anxiety and all that stuff. And I have these voices in my head. And it's like, how do I navigate that? But the embracing the new journey, I think that is the issue with the voices in my head and what maybe my friends are feeling or what you were saying is that we are shifting our life differently. You know what I mean? Like, although the friend that I referenced, yes, or the friend that I was just talking about, she was like, "You're famous, like you're famous," and I'm like, "Yo, hold up." Like, Beyonce doesn't even know that I exist. I am not famous. My personal Instagram has more followers than my Kurious podcast. I am not famous. But to them, they're like, you're putting yourself out there and you're doing this new thing and you're transforming into a new person. And it's interesting how they take that and be like, oh my God, you're like famous. And to me, it's just like, I get it because that worry that you were talking about, that anxiety is to me is rooted in this new Cayman. Whatever this new Cayman is, it's obviously a confident, more Cayman. It's a hopefully more healthier Cayman and someone that is having a creative outlet that's going to have to shift your perspective and it's going to have to shift the way that you move. That maybe the people around you were, I don't want to say they were comfortable because I don't want any of my friends to think like you guys were comfortable with the old me and now it's new me and then in a boo boo. But I think that's, I mean, that's, there's something to be said when you are embracing a new journey and you're shifting who Bryan is. You're shifting the mode of where Bryan was being molded in. And the people around you are interacting with that and they're taking that in. And I think that was something I never ever, as a project manager, you always take like, what risk are you going to face with this project? And that was never a risk that I thought was going to happen, is that at least this soon, this early, that me
Right.
embracing a new journey is going to start affecting the old journey. And I was like, wow, that was a huge thing. So I totally understand what you're talking about, the worry and like shifting your things and shifting that. But I guess I'm glad you're talking about all this because this is literally everything that I wrote down. But to me, then how do you not, because okay, what I'm doing is I'm stop being a people pleaser. I think in order for
Same.
me to embark on this journey, I have to put myself first, which is very hard, especially if I don't even like to say that I have a podcast to people at a random party.
Yeah.
But I have to stop being a people pleaser. And I think that's another thing that you're like what I hear with the whole ship thing is you kind of have to stop. You did the old Bryan, the old 9 to 5, and that was pleasing people, but that didn't satisfy you. And now you need to please yourself, which is probably going to ruffle some feathers.
Hmm. Yeah. What's the question in there?
I don't really know. I just, I would just say, I was just talking.
I mean, there's so many questions in there. Yeah. Like, I think,
Well, okay, let me
yeah,
ask you this.
I didn't really answer your last question in terms of, I answered it for myself.
Yeah.
Like, the heaviness is just like, I bring that there. I don't really navigate it. I am self conscientious of like how that's affecting my friends. And because of the people pleasing,
Hmm.
it does like create more anxiety of like, oh crap, like you end up literally getting faced with,
Hmm.
uh, am I like is the real me good enough for them? Which, if you're around the right people, that's true. but that doesn't mean that I haven't spent a lot of my life feeling like I can't be
Mhm,
me and
mhm,
be accepted, right?
mhm,
And so, like, I think that, and that's where the trauma starts,
mhm,
how it starts affecting it over time.
mhm,
And so, navigating it for me has looked less of like being around those friends and bringing a different energy. It's grounded confidence that the friends I have chosen
mhm,
and are going to and share this with, I'm safe enough to share this with.
mhm,
And if I need to share it, which I am finding out that I do need to share it for
mhm,
me to find the next place for me to grow, I have to build up the types of relationships that are not going to turn away from me
mhm,
when I do start to
mhm.
more align myself with who I am internally, and show externally what that is.
Do you ever feel that, I don't know if there's a question, but I'm gonna say what I'm gonna verbal diarrhea, and then if there's a question in there, there's a question. If there's not, then I'm just gonna verbal diarrhea. But well, what I was going to say is too, like talking about like the friends and the new you is like what broke my heart about that too is that I don't know even how to put it. What I guess what broke my heart is as you're embracing this new journey and you're barking on this new self and you're making a new you and you're shifting your perspective and you're doing things that are for you, not for other people. And I think right there, I think that may, in my opinion, like what I'm trying to, I guess, get out and what my friend, what when my friend told me about this, what I was like saying in my mind is that like I want all my friends and the people around me who see me growing and moving into a different space to know that I wouldn't be there if it wasn't for them. And so
Sure.
for them to feel that like, oh, it kind of feels like what I was getting is like they kind of feel like it's a MySpace thing. Remember back in the day with MySpace and how you put your like 8 friends up there?
Yeah.
I've always had that issue with friends in other groups where they see me out and about with other friends and then they don't feel represented. I guess like to my friends who feel that way, it's just like every friend provides a different puzzle to me. They have a different piece of me. They energize me in different ways. And just because you don't see yourself reflected in this or see yourself here, please don't think that you're not benefiting or supporting this in other ways. You know what I mean? A lot of
Yeah.
them provide great feedback and tell me how they feel. That means more than a like and a follow. That means
Hmm.
more than you sitting up here. You know what I mean? And the friend that I referenced gave me her rug. I wouldn't have been able to have those first videos in the living room without that rug. That rug absorbs so much sound. And that benefited me way more than her sitting on that podcast. So I guess why I'm saying this because I just want to take a time on my podcast for any of my friends who are listening to know that like as I'm going on this new journey and you may not see yourself here, please understand that you do play a huge role. Your support plays a huge role. You showing up every day plays a huge role. So I just wanted to get that off my chest because I feel like when we were talking about like not being a people pleaser, blah 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 blah. I don't want my friends who are listening to this to. And one of my good friends, Abby, said this very well. She said, "You're not replacing us. You're just expanding." And that is exactly what I'm doing. I'm not replacing you, and I'm not putting hierarchies over you. I as Cayman need this in order to continue for the next 30 years. And so it's going to have to look different and it's going to have to shape different and it's going to maybe possibly not have you on, but that doesn't or shouldn't reflect the amount of care I have for you and our friendship and so forth. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. And I think, like, I guess just talk about like relationships and friendships a little bit. Like, yeah, every friend in your past, like if you've had some sort of, not anything deeper than, hey, what's the weather kind of
Yes.
conversation with, like anybody you've connected in a deep place, like it usually comes from relating about something
Mhm,
or admiring something about
mhm,
them. And so, like, each step of the way
mhm,
to like what your eventual end goal is going to be is going to require different types of miniature transformations within yourself. And you're going to be, it's going to, they're like stepping stones. And I don't mean that in like, how do I put this? So it's more like we talk about superheroes. We talked about it last time.
yes.
how do we get to a place where we all view our lives as like we're the superhero and we've all got our sidekicks, but also hold it true that our friends who are our sidekicks are also their own superhero to which we're the sidekick sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
Like that's true, and that's just going to evolve and change over time. And like, yeah, like I have friends, and so does my wife, who are really close friends who have moved away, and
Mhm.
like what you realize, um, like I've got one specific friend who moved away to Florida, and he was like he was a really close friend in a lot of ways, and some of the things I admire the most about him
Mhm.
are like his discipline, his way of just like tackling a problem head on without like considering consequences. If he just like sees it as a problem, he's going to solve it. And when he moved away, like just being around him less, I had less discipline in my life. Like I noticed the change, but I also appreciated like I got a lot of that from him,
Yeah.
and now that's still taking me to other places that I
Yeah.
also need to go in my life.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, how do we all get to that place where we all just like can hold both those truths at the same time? I hope that helps to kind of explain your point.
Yes, and it kind of always that what is that old Christian religion saying that God bring people into your life for a reason? Like they're not always here to stay for a long time. They're just here to teach you things and give you pieces. And I 100% agree. I have friends that just moved to Portland, and if they're listening to this, they're like the couple that I was just like, "Ooh, I gotta push further." Like they're living a life that I would love if I had a partner to live that type of life and have that type of luxury and freedom. And they've never been on here, but and I've never said that because obviously I don't share my feelings to them. But yeah, like having friends that are teaching you things, are pulling you in different ways that they didn't even know. Just being a friend, just
Mhm.
simply by being a friend, you are teaching me or you are helping me that is beyond being here and sitting here. But I mean, if you want to be here, I like literally I just booked one of them the other day. I was like, fine, if you want to be here, we could be here. I'll put you on. But yeah, I just wanted to, I don't know, it was just I was weighing on my heart, weighing on my mind, and I was like, clearly I need to talk this out. But all right, so I want to first talk to you about, because I think, well, first of all, let's talk about self doubt. I
Mhm.
wrote down a lot of self doubt that I have been going through the past year. I remember one time you asked me, I don't know if you told me, like, are you like comparing yourself to Joe Rogan or blah, 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 blah. And I talked about this in Angie's podcast too, how I was like, it's not necessarily comparing yourself to Joe Rogan. Is for me, is making sure that I'm doing the best that I can do with the tools that I have been given. But I think my self-doubt also stems from just being impatient. And like when we were talking about how someone gave me shitty advice, 2 weeks later I just, landed I just scheduled someone and then now I have another person. Now I probably have enough, knock on wood, to carry me through February. But before that, I was questioning myself. I was self-doubting myself. And I always hear other artists, and I don't like to use the word artist for me, but other people out there who create things, they talk about self-doubt. And I was wondering, like, through your journey of, building your business, building your wood shop, even making that table, do you ever go through moments of self-doubt?
Constantly, like just 100% of the time. And that's where a lot of my heaviness was. And like, yeah,
What do we do? How do
what
we
do
get
we
through
do?
that?
For me, so yeah, I guess I'll just kind of say I'll talk about that table and say where I'm at now because I
Mhm.
do feel like I'm finally in this place where I'm kind of turning a corner, and but I know that turning a corner means I'm going to be faced with much more self
Mhm.
doubt,
Mhm.
but it's going to be like coming from a different place. So the table he's talking about was this. Took me almost a year to build. Well, design and build took me over a year, and it was just this like incredibly customized project, and I put a lot of bells and whistles and did like a lot of different inlay that I haven't seen, had electronics in it. So just like really went balls to the walls in terms of like way outside of my comfort
Yeah.
zone. And now I've got money on the line and I've got to make this thing and try to make it be profitable. And I didn't quote enough. And so like all like basically all the ways that I got stressed out was I created this hellscape for myself. And just to be like really clear, this isn't on my customer at all.
Mhm.
It's not on my client. It's every time I was faced with, here's me doing a thing for me, right? Like I'm doing this really cool idea that I had and I'm bringing it to life. That's like inside of me. That's what I've always wanted to do. I'm realizing more now that I am more of an artist than I ever let myself get credit for
Yeah.
or give myself credit for. And so, yeah, there'd be, so I'm going to put this on Instagram and talk about self doubt
Yes.
and some stuff. And a quick stat about that table: it took 400 hours of labor.
How many days? Well, you said it took a year, right?
So it took almost a year. And so like when I subtract out all of like my getting ready for shows and like building all the other product that I have to make throughout the year, I basically did 400 hours of labor inside of like 850 hours that I could have been working on the table. So over half the time, 450 hours out of 850 hours, I would be too overwhelmed to go into the shop and work on anything, and would like be spending time in my head and like not like totally just like spiraling all the time, but like also just what's painful about this? Like what am I being faced with that's causing the overwhelm? And like going into those places of, and I needed therapy, I needed friends like you, I needed a lot of things to explore that. And I think I'm also one who really loves to understand, like Curious is your podcast, right?
Yeah.
Like my curiosity is also like, I want to know how things work and fit together, even the intangible things. And so when I'm struggled, like faced with this overwhelm that I can't bear, I'm in problem solving mode, trying to figure out how did I get to this exact point so that I can avoid it again in the future.
Mhm.
But I also had to learn how to like feel the feelings that I'd been repressing for the first 28, 29 years of my life too. And then, so now it's like you've got that time lapse of bottled up emotion,
Mhm.
and now it's finally coming out during you're doing this incredible like project that's the biggest scope of anything that you've ever done in your life. And it ends up being a lot, right? And so like learning how to be gentle with myself through that was incredibly difficult. I'm still not nearly as gentle with myself as I need to be because my critic is so loud. Um, but yeah, like it overwhelmed me so much.
Mhm.
And now that I'm done with the table, like I pushed through, like I told myself before I started that thing, there was no way I was backing out of this.
Mhm.
And so I followed through. And I think that's part of a recipe to get out from a stuck place,
Yeah.
right? Is like make a commitment to yourself that feels more than you think you're capable of and find yourself on the other side.
Yeah.
And
I
now,
I when you were I like what you're saying because I feel like there was 3 things I kinda wanna ask you, but I forgot the other 2. Oh, holding yourself accountable is what I was hearing, and that's it's so interesting too because I will always quit, like, acting, I mean, acting and singing took me all the way through college, but, like, swimming, karate, piano lessons, like, I always quit those. And I think when I was doing therapy, the first couple of sessions, we learned right away that I quit because I just don't believe in myself. And I think when you were talking about self-doubt, for me, how do I deal with the self-doubt is it's interesting to me because giving up is never have never crossed my mind yet. But
mhm,
pivoting and changing the plan has always. And that's what I felt like I was hearing is like learning to pivot and learning to
yeah,
change instead of giving up. You have to like maybe think of something different and move a different way. And when I was faced with no guests, I was like, well, I guess the next option is we're just going to talk to ourselves, which is extremely scary. I don't know if I will ever do that. Hopefully, I have a guest coming up soon, and I'm going to ask her because she does a lot of like just sitting in front of a camera and talk to yourself. That is so scary. I
yeah,
think I feel more protected and comfortable and vulnerable and safe with the guests versus just like being out there just balls to the wall. But you also called yourself a creator, and I'm always struggling. Like someone was like, "You have a podcast." I'm like, and they're like, "Your podcast." I'm like, Do you feel comfortable calling yourself a creator? What does it mean to be a creator, and do you like that title?
I'm learning how to like the title, right? Because like it's a being an artist is something that I think for most of my life I've been told. either that's too hard of a thing to actually ever accomplish, or, like it's not as useful
Yeah.
as something practical, right? And that's very much why I found myself in engineering.
So do you think you're
Um,
an artist? Do
so
you
I
like the
do
word artist?
I'm finding that I am more of an artist. And so this is the thing that I was reflecting on the other day that kind of like convinced me internally that like, okay, I need to own this more. And it's more of like, okay, so just in terms of expression,
Mhm.
right? Like in order to make sense of, at least for me, I find in order to make sense of what's going on in my internal thinking, like what my belief systems
Mhm.
are, especially around the ways in which I get in my own way, I need to figure out how to articulate that or express it. And like articulation, like what we're doing right now, having a conversation is one way of doing it. And I'm finding it's maybe not the most, it's kind of a draining way for me to do it,
Mhm.
honestly. But I still enjoy it. But I'm finding that even though every feeling anybody's ever had has already been felt by somebody somewhere, and I can go find that in art, I can find it in reading, I can find it somewhere,
Yeah.
I'd still rather try to figure out how to express it exactly the way
Yeah.
I
Yes.
feel it. And
Yes.
so that's what's making me an artist. And I want to be able to like show that to
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. I like that you said that because part of going back to that person who gave me bad advice was always like, "Oh, you're defiant." And I read his horoscope, like read something about Sagittarius and fire signs because you're an Aries, so you're a fire sign too. And they said with Sagittarius, they're defiant only because they don't like to walk the status quo. And so as
Mhm.
that person was giving me advice, the advice was the status quo. And most importantly, it wasn't what I wanted. And yeah, you can call it like defiant, but like you're saying, I want to express how I myself the way I want to express myself. I want to express my feelings the way I want to express my feelings. And if that shows up in this way that you don't like, I'm not defiant. I'm just looking for criticism that can help it be better, not change my message and not change me. So it's funny because when I
Mm.
listen to people like Kendrick Lamar or like Serena Williams or anyone that's like great in their field that you can, I don't know if you consider an athlete an artist, but wouldn't, I would say they're in the same house.
Yeah.
Um, there's always a message of I did what I wanted. I was like I want to do what I want to do. I want to express the way I want to express, and that's what made me successful. And when I one thing that I was going to talk about in another podcast, but I can touch it here is I just feel like the reason why I want to say what I want to say is because I feel like when I'm on TikTok and I'm looking at other podcasts, it just feels like they're going with the status quo and then saying what they want to say in the status quo. So it's interesting that you define yourself as an artist in the creative thing, and one of that definition is to be defiant in your feelings, stand in your feelings, but put it in a way in a vehicle that's not just like disruptive. You know what I mean? Because some people can really just go out there and just say their feelings and like, bro, what are you doing? Like, you need to like calm that shit down. And you're
Yeah.
doing your feelings in woodworking and expressing your passion in that in woodworking. So, and I'm doing that here. It's just funny that that's how you identify or define an artist because other people who are what I consider real artists say the same thing. So, yeah. How do you you were talking about, well, criticism. How do you with the voices in our heads, we are always
Mhm.
critiquing ourselves. We are the worst critique. What how do you know that is the devil on your shoulder versus the angel on your shoulder?
Boy, am I not a good resource to answer that question, but I'll do my best. I think it's something that I reflect on a lot,
Yeah.
and I still can't come to like a surefire way to discern. But one of the things that you know, I think the critic, whatever my voice is saying, whatever the critic is saying, is usually pointing out something that could be done better,
Yeah.
right? And I don't always know if it's better because it needs to be better or if it just could be better. And like just because I can doesn't mean I should all the time. So that's something I have to remind myself all the time.
Yes.
And I consciously remind myself, and sometimes it does nothing to help the anxiety or any of that go away, but
Yeah.
it's still like a truth that I need to hold tight to.
Yeah.
But I kind of lump in the majority of my stress and anxiety goes starts in worry. like me just worrying about things, right? So like the critic is maybe just pointing something out, like maybe I need to treat him more neutral, but then that causes a reaction of worry in me, which gets me nowhere. And so like worry really like tells you what you care about,
Hmm.
right? Like if I'm worried about looking good on social media, which is a worry. Like it's a worry that I wish I didn't have as much of. And I'm trying to work on that and figure out where that comes from. But if I'm worried about that, it means that I care that, like, I know for me, that means that I care that I have a message that people might not receive
Hmm.
if I don't look good on
Yeah.
social media.
Yes.
Right. Like, go ahead.
Sorry, I love that you said that because that is something that I struggle with all the time is this looking good. We live in a world where everything has to look a certain way. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be quality. It doesn't have to be good for us as long as it looks good. It's kind of like Tinseltown, like LA. Like everyone talks about how LA is this shiny thing, but it, deep down inside is cheap. And that bothers me the absolute most. And I think that's the reason
Yeah.
why I struggle with doing solo videos because I have to stare at my ugly face instead of like looking at everyone else's faces. But I love that you said that because it definitely doesn't make me feel crazy. And I don't know why we do that as people. Like, I would love to know the psychology of why
Well,
things have to look good in order for us to take it seriously. Like, it can literally, like McDonald's. Like McDonald's commercials are great. Their burgers look way better than when you get them in person. And we all know that. And we still eat it. And not saying McDonald's is bad for you. I mean, it's bad for you, but
yeah.
yeah. But they marketing and that's the key thing, like the power of marketing, the power of like storytelling, the power of just like capturing someone's attention by their vision in a story, even though it's to their detriment. And I don't know. That's something that I always struggle to is do I look good? You know what I mean? Like, is
Mhm.
my product, is my packaging the best? Is my packaging like Joe Rogan's? This is not, but like, how can I get there? So it's funny that you brought that up too about like looking good.
Yeah, for me, it's another thing in the last couple of weeks because like, so I finished my table 2 weeks ago, and I've literally just been taking it really easy, not going
Yeah,
to the shop very much, and just
yeah,
spending a lot of time thinking. And one of the things I've bit about my people pleasing, right, is I'm constantly I'm looking. I've got two monitors running in my brain at the same
yes,
time, right? One monitor is, am I doing things that are good for me? And I'm trying to let that one take the place of both, but the other one is still, do other people
hmm,
think that I look good enough to like listen to? And
hmm,
and for me, what that comes from is like at a young age, right? Like I don't know when it happened, but like I was very much clearly discouraged from being my authentic self,
yes,
right? In different ways. And that's how, each way I had to like sacrifice a part of me so that I could survive. That came out as a different coping mechanism, right? That I have to unlearn. And so it's very much like I'm having to make sure, like, that second monitor is me evaluating, am I still like fitting in, or am I acceptable?
hmm,
Where, but what I want to believe and what I'm working towards acting on is just that first monitor, is that we're all here on this world to interact with each other, and we all, like we are talking about the superheroes and your sidekicks, and we can all be that for each other. Like that's, I feel like that's what life is about.
yes,
And so I believe that if I can figure out how to be the most me, or the way that I was before I had to learn how to fit in
yeah.
to society, like that's going to lift everybody else up.
I like that. That helps because fitting in, maybe that's what it is. It's like if you look good, then you fit in. And I guess that goes all the way back to being popular. Like the most popular people were the hottest ones. And maybe there is like the actual sidekick who was the goofy looking one, but he had like that cool personality, or he had the dad that like didn't care that they drank in the basement. But I love that the fitting in part is like trying, just looking good and try to fit in by looking good and stuff like that. So that definitely helped. I'm going to take that little nugget and like tell myself that maybe are you trying to fit in? Because that's one thing my therapist will always say is like, are you trying to fit in? And it's so funny because if we go back to the being a Sagittarius, it's about not is about being defiant because you don't like the status quo. And the status quo. Every time I hear the status quo, have you watched High School Musical?
Not for a long time, but I know I've seen it.
They have a song called "Stick with the things you know. If you want to be cool, follow one simple rule: don't mess with the status quo." And like as a
Mm,
kid, I was like, "Oh, I gotta, Troy obviously can't be an actor and a basketball player. He has to, it's safe for him to be a basketball player. It's not safe for him to be a theater person because that's not the status quo. But it's also interesting as an adult that the message is now flipped where it's like, actually, I think as a kid, you view it like, oh, he's not safe. But as an adult, you realize that you can be safe. And that
mhm.
I think that's the whole thing is that the machine is trying to get you to fit in, you need to look good, and you need to meet the status quo. And I guess what you're saying as being an artist, sometimes you have to do left. You have to share your feelings and you have to go left in order to like spark something that's not the status quo. So I don't know. I find that I just that that definitely helped me out with that all that stuff. But another thing I was going to say about when you were talking about worrying, I think for me, why I worry is because and maybe this might fit for you and anyone else listening, is that our bodies are designed and our mind is designed to keep us safe. It's like it
Mhm.
is designed to keep us safe. So if you built a safe life, like a 9 to 5 life in a condo in downtown and you're safe, and now you want to, I would say, quote unquote, risk that, your body is going to be like, yo, what are we doing? I'm going to continue to remind you that you're moving out of our comfort zone. And so I always have to check myself too and say that we're worried because we're doing something that's out of the status quo, aka out of our comfort zone. I
Yeah.
don't know if that is that something you feel like too. Like when you worry, it's more because we're doing something uncomfortable and our body's like, this is not what we're designed to do. I'm designed to keep you safe. But it's like, well, that's what life is. It's like living on that edge and just like not always relying on comfortability and safe.
Yeah, and I think, for me, yes, so, like, I worry often whenever I'm doing something different than the way that I've learned to automatically do things, right?
Yeah.
And I learned to automatically do things because that's what kept me safe.
Hmm.
And so now that I'm waking up to life and realizing, like, okay, doing all those automatic things isn't getting me to where I actually want to be,
Hmm.
and then I have to make change. And so, yeah, so that's really when your body feels that.
Hmm.
And a lot of times, like before therapy, that would just happen. I'd worry, and I'd understand that I'm worried about something, but if I'm not assigning it to the right thing, I don't process it the right way or learn from it. But I
Hmm.
guess that's what I will say today is, like, now worry just tells me like, if I reverse it, right, it tells me what I want. And as long as I recognize that I can't guarantee that I get that thing that I want, it's still okay to want that
Yeah.
thing.
How does
And
worrying
and
tell you what sorry, how does worrying tell you what you want?
so, like, give me an example of something you worry about. It might be easier for me to use
Well,
your
I guess
example.
now that you said that, I just answered my own question because 'cause you're like, "Give me something that you worry about," and I say, "I want more guests," and that's exactly what I want, is I want more guests, and I worry about not getting guests.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, sometimes that can, like, be convoluted. Like, sometimes it could be shame covered up by fear,
Yeah.
covered up by, like, you can have multiple steps of things, but, like, usually worry, if you can look at it from, like, a neutral perspective, which is really hard because already if you're worried and your body is already like, what the hell, we need to survive, like, where's the thing that's going to keep me safe?
Mhm.
You're already not thinking logically. So we have to, like, develop ways in which we can get ourselves calm, and so we can look at the worry from a neutral perspective, and then that will tell us what we want.
Mhm.
And the thing, so that's what helps me the most is, like, I'm worried about this, which means I want this,
Mhm.
which means, like, if that's coming from within, like, that there's a reason that I want to go try that, even if I fail,
Mhm.
it's worth trying for.
Mhm.
And it's just convincing yourself that it's worth trying for. And, like, that's what reflection is for. Like, if I do an action and I didn't get the results I expected, I then inspect, okay, what feelings do I have around this, and like what would I have done differently?
Mhm.
If I can come to that other side, like I wouldn't have done anything differently, then I know that I'm headed the right direction. I have to just keep trying.
Yeah.
And that's described in a perfect world. Obviously, there's going to be way different variables and caveats that come into play, but like really distilled down, that's just like my recipe that I've been using. And it's like helping me find hope, and it's helping me realize the things that I want intrinsically are it is about taking care of me,
Yeah.
but my end goal is to actually take care of those around me.
Yes.
But I need to take care of myself first. And
Yes.
I'm starting to see the clues and the insights, and you
Yes.
know, by using my business as a vehicle to try to achieve something for myself,
Yeah.
I'm learning better not only how to take care of myself, but how that's eventually going to lead to taking care of those around me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot. And that's,
I always daydream of how I can help my friends too, like what I would do. Because sometimes, I grew up on the OG YouTuber gang where you have your friends that are your assistant, and like. There's this comedian. What's his, well, his podcast is Stavi. His name is Stavi, like Stavi World or something like that. But he just recruited his best friend that he knew for 2 years to be the guy behind the camera and got him out of his 9 to 5 job. And I'm like, oh, that'll be cool. Or sometimes I think about like, would I buy my parents a house? But I'm very lucky that my parents just paid off their house, and I don't think they will care to live in another one. So I was like, well, maybe if I have the money, I will remodel their entire house, like give them a new kitchen that they've been wanting, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, yeah, you definitely have to. That's old saying where you need to put your mask on first before someone else. And that's exactly what I'm doing, because also it's like why would it's just it just makes more sense for me to put my mask on first. Like, I'm sorry, like I guess that's stop me not being a people pleaser, but like it just makes more sense for me to look out for myself first, because I guess I'm not trying to be like a dictator where I want to look out for myself so I can conquer the world and fuck you guys all. It's like I want to look out I want to look out for myself, so one, I can better myself, and then two, thank everyone that helped me on this journey. So yeah. I also
was there,
okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say, was there a time where like you said right now it feels natural for you to look out for yourself first?
Yeah.
Was that always the case? Was there a time where you thought that you'd be able to like be all the things you want to be by just taking care? Like for me, I remember a time where it was not even like you couldn't even tell me straight to my face, "Hey, you should take care of yourself
Yeah.
first," and I would have heard that.
Yeah.
Like that would have just right over my head.
Mhm. I don't even know what take caring yourself means, but I guess what I to answer your question, I think I think I think taking care of yourself, what it means to me is like starting to do things that you want to do, or like doing
Mm,
things, I don't know, it's just like For okay, I'll explain it like this. Theater and acting was something that I love to do, something that I thrive to do. I applied for acting schools. In college, I did a radio show, right? But I didn't believe that I can actually do it. I didn't believe I didn't, I remember asking my mom, like, how much would it cost for me to go to Las Vegas? Like, can I go to Las Vegas? Can I move to Las Vegas? I remember looking up like headshots and how do people do that. But I was just so afraid to get out of my comfort zone, really what it was. And I guess, after moving out and getting a good job and getting a car, and I'm like, well, I did all the things that I guess we are supposed to do, and my fire is still not lit. And so I guess what I mean by putting my mask on for myself is not letting not letting other things light my fire. You know what I mean? Like not letting
yeah.
this light my fire. And that was another thing too when like COVID hit, I have my relationship with God and whatever that means, right? But for a long time, I had to really take my faith back, right?
Mm,
And so then I put
mhm.
my faith in the government, and then 2020 showed me I got to take that bitch back. So now it's like, well, what do I do? Like, who do I put my faith in? Like, like I'm cracking. I'm losing my fucking mind. And I think what I mean by putting my mask on first is instead of putting my faith in other institutes. It's now time to put it in me. And so instead of having other people come and bring wood to a campfire, and then if it dies, they're like, well, I'm the, now it's time for me to bring my own wood and make sure that this fire stays lit because it's my fire and I need to keep that going. So I guess that's what I mean by I'm putting my mask on myself.
Yeah, I hear that with like the metaphor of the fire. Like I
Mhm.
feel like I'm still just like I'm a coal right now.
Mhm.
I haven't gotten the fire to relight. And so that's like I think I'm close. I think I'm
Yeah.
like right there.
Yes. You have a
Or
pilot
it-
fire. You know those pilot fires in kitchens that
yeah,
never go out? It doesn't look like they're there, but it's there. You still got that.
yeah. And that's why I asked because like I personally went through like this giant like stubborn period
Yeah.
of like I don't need to take care of me. Like I'm accomplishing a lot of things and like things are good and like it took a lot for me to like for somebody to crack me open enough
Mhm.
to be like, no, you're actually like slowly killing yourself.
Mhm.
And like eventually I came to that conclusion on my own. But like it took a lot of people from the outside to be
Yeah.
like, come on, man.
Yes. Do you think this is going to be a tough question? But my therapist asked me this too. I'm like, girl, this is too deep. She was like, what happens if you get there and you're still not happy? Do you ever think like what happens if you get that dream business of yours and you're still not happy? In my opinion, I joke about this with my friend Crystal, and Steve Harvey said this the other day too. Like they were like, "Why do you have so many cars?" And he was like, "I used to live in a car, so if I ever lose, if as something happens where I get canceled, at least I can sleep in a Rolls Royce." And that's how I feel like I may not ever be happy or my fire be lit to the fullest, and I honestly, truly, this might be controversial. And this might be the little cold heart patch talking. I don't know if anyone truly will ever really truly be happy. I don't know what that means. I don't know. I don't think Jeff Bezos is happy because he has billions of dollars. You know what I mean? Like, I think we
Yeah.
are all damaged in our own way and we're trying our best and we think like all the glitz and glamour will help. But yeah, I just, I always think about that. Like, what if we get to the spot that we need to get to? Will we be happy? And I will always like to say, I don't know, but I know that I will be pleased with myself that I got there anyway. You know what I mean? I rather get there depressed and hopeless and suicidal thoughts than just to sit where we are in hopeless, depressed, and suicidal thoughts. Trigger
Sure.
warning.
I'm trying to think. No, that's cool. I live in that heavy energy place, so I I'm soaking it in. I'm soaking it in. I'm adding it onto my shoulders, and I'm going to tell you what I think. Um, I think. Oh man, what was your? Give me a second here. I need you to go back over a little bit. What'd you say right at the end there?
What I mean, Jeff Bezos. I rather
Oh yeah,
be
here we
depressed
go.
over there than depressed down here.
Got it. So I think happiness is out there.
Mhm,
I think it's not a destination,
mhm,
right? And I think even if it doesn't exist, like
mhm,
even if happiness really like is something you can never depend on,
mhm,
we shouldn't live other than we can chase it because I think that's really important to the way we act upon our lives. Um, and I also think just like yeah, focus on the process, right? Of like I'm going to circle back to the beginning of our conversation where you said you know what you want to have happen, but it happens in a different how, right? I think the best work that we can do is know what we truly want
mhm,
and then try to open ourselves up
mhm,
to whatever that how is.
mhm,
And I think the more expansive we can get into the openness of how the how happens,
mhm.
that's going to be at our happiest point. And
Yeah,
like way easier said than done.
yeah,
Like that, where rubber meets the road is painful,
yeah. Mhm.
right? Like thinking about that. But, and that's where some of the heaviness is
Yeah,
like realize, like you're feeling the pain of having expected it to go a different way and being faced with reality and then having to remodify your expectations constantly. And I think, I know for me personally, why the last 9 months has been really hard
Mhm.
is because I've tried more outside of my comfort zone and been slapped in the face with more different hows than I ever have before in my life. And things that I came up with to do, not that I was being told to do,
Mhm.
those had way less stakes. And like living the life that everybody could view me as successful, that was easy. There
Mhm.
was no fear behind it because it was just like, the worst that can happen is I feel the same as I feel today
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
and have a little bit more money.
Yes. What was I gonna say? You had something. I just had a thought in my head. I hate that. I need to write fucking things down. But
Just
damn,
jump over
oh,
it.
you're talking about. I don't know what you were saying, but it reminded me of like rejection and
Mhm.
fate. Like talking about going through a path and and not looking right and all that stuff. Something in that what you were saying just popped like rejection in my mind, and I was thinking like how I continue to go down this path, like setting out a site, what you want, going after it, knowing that it's going to change, knowing that there's always going to be kind of like the Wizard of Oz analogy that I always use. Like Dorothy went on this path to go find the wizard, but she went through crazy monkeys, a witch, she found friends, she got poisoned. And that's just how life is going to be. And I think one of the poison little poppy flowers is rejection. And I was just thinking about like what I tell myself to get over rejection is that like every time I'm on Grinder, I get rejected all the fucking time, and I don't know why. I'm trying to. Me and my gay friends are talking about like why is it so hard for me to find someone to hook up with when I'm a guy looking for another guy, and it just seems like it's so hard. But every time I DM someone that doesn't respond back, I just pretend it's just another Grinder like message, like oh, just another Grinder guy that rejected me. But that's the only way that I can get through rejection is just like think of it as like a Grinder person that's rejecting you. But yeah, I don't know why I needed to say that, but something that you said just maybe pop up this story of how I tell myself when I get through rejection, like how I deal with it is just pretend you're messaging people on Grinder and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, having an expectation and then like having like finding the willpower and the motivation to try to make that thing that you
Yeah.
envision happen is
Mhm.
like so part of
Mhm.
like where our healing is,
Mhm.
but it's also part of like you're gonna be faced with reality too. So yeah, it does feel like rejection,
Yeah.
even though I mean, we can learn to change our perspective and like doesn't have to be rejection. I'm trying
Yeah.
to think what my equivalent of is to Grinder. Being rejected is probably like
Let me ask you this. One thing I struggle with is do you ever make something and you don't like it? And do you just sell it anyway? Because for me, there's times where I'm like, oh, I don't know if I like this. And one thing, is going back kind of, I think that's kind of like self doubt, but going back to the self doubt, like one thing I always tell myself is that when you're in the moment, be in the moment because you have to be in the moment, especially right now. Like, I'm going to be a different Cayman when I edit and I can't juggle both of those at the same time. So I have both Caymans need to trust each other. That the one in the moment will be like, we're doing it, we're having fun, we're vibing, we're in the pocket. I still haven't found that pocket yet, but it is what it is. And then
mhm,
the one who is editing is obviously going to see it differently because every time I edit, I'm like, damn, I missed that question, or I can't believe I dropped that point. But it's like it's hard. Like, I have fucking all these lights and
yeah.
things like that. But I there are sometimes where I have a conversation, I'm like, it didn't hit the way I wanted to hit. It's not coming across the way I wanted to come across. And even when I look at like my clips and like my YouTube thumbnails, it's like it's still not there. And it's just like, how do I balance that of doing work? I'm in a sticky situation because if I don't like it, yeah, I can scrap it, but I feel like that's dumb. Like I feel like I put way too much work in to scrap something like that. So do you
Yeah.
ever have that issue where when you're building a board or building anything where you're like, I don't really know if I like it, but I still need to sell it?
So man, it's a great question. I don't allow myself enough to
Mhm,
build things that I won't also sell. So I slow way down too
mhm,
much on the like the preparation side. Like I know I prepare too much. I think too much about like how can I, because I really care about my products being a little bit different than what's out there.
mhm,
And right now, some patterns are different. So,
mhm,
like kind of just the I don't know, people describe there's like a differentness about your work, but I can't even like put my finger on it,
Yeah.
right? I want that to be even more different,
Yeah.
but I don't allow myself to because of the fear of not being able to sell it. So I think I'm in a similar boat as you, but I think the way to like reframe that, at
Mhm.
least is the way I think about it. I'm trying with
Mhm.
not a ton of success,
Mhm.
but like exactly what you're saying. Your past self who's doing the thing needs to trust your future self who's editing or whatever or like going over it. They
Mhm.
need to trust each other absolutely, but it's easier for the like for you if you're doing the podcast. That's really I think you're really good at being present. I think when you are you suck people's souls into the conversation, man. And then I think when you're editing, so that's like your new present self looking at a past self,
Yes.
you do critique that one, but I think the way to reframe that now is like, well, that needed to happen for this to happen to notice the thing that should be
Yeah.
different, right?
Yeah.
And like it all needs to happen.
Yeah.
And so like I continue to find myself worrying so much that I'm trying to again, like I'll bring it back to the ship. Like I'm trying to steer the ship in the right direction and I'll get to a result
Mhm.
and then I'll be able to look back at that situation and see I was an anxious mess that
Yeah.
entire time, and I was worried about steering the ship rather than sailing the seas and like learning what there is to be explored.
Yes.
But I still got a great result from that.
Mhm.
Why was I worried the whole time?
Yes. Yeah.
And
I
so yeah, how do we how do we recognize we're worried when we're worried
yes.
and say everything's exactly how it's supposed to be?
Yes. I think I don't know about you, but I think it's just impatient. I think I'm just impatient. I think that's what it
Yeah.
is. I want to
Here's what
be say it again?
I was going to say another phenomena I've been realizing about myself that's super disappointing, right? So, like, let's say I'm here and I'm trying. So maybe you can't see my hands on the
I can see
screen,
your
but I'm trying to take up half the screen for people listening if they're not. Where I'm here and I want to be here.
Yes.
A lot of times, like as I take those baby steps, I see that the goal is actually
Yeah.
way farther away,
Yeah.
and so it's not that I'm not making progress. It's just that I expected the results to be here sooner
Yes.
and just being okay with that. And so like I feel that that's painful too.
Mhm.
Um, I have a lot of impatience and I think that comes with ambition
Mhm.
and realizing that I've got way more ideas in my head than I'm ever actually going to be able to express or talk
Mhm.
about or work on.
Yes. I think
And we
that's
have to
me
grieve
too.
that.
I feel like I have so much thoughts in my head. That's why I wanted to write them down. And I can't remember one. I love the analogy of like controlling the ship and then just being like that girl from Titanic and be like, fuck it. Like I'm just standing on the edge with my arms out and some hot boy holding my waist so I don't fall over.
That's what I want to feel like right now.
But I love that analogy because that brings me to my goal for this podcast for the next year, and my goal for my 30s is letting go of the steering wheel. Jesus, take the wheel, and be Kate, whoever, whatever her fucking name is from Titanic, and just let the ship go, just let it go, like just let go. And I think when you were saying when you were giving me a compliment, I can't remember what it is because anytime someone gives me a compliment I immediately just like
Just miss it. Oh man, you got to work on that.
I know there's so much I gotta work on, but baby steps that can wait, we can wait on that. But damn it, what was my point? Something about the analogy, whatever. But the point is, for my 30s and for this podcast, I want to have more fun. And I think
Yeah.
what one thing you're talking about, like when people you need to look good, I think that is why. Okay, now I remember. That is why I rolled my eyes at your compliment, is because although you may think that I have this ability to draw people in, to be 100% honest, I don't see that. And so maybe it goes to you when with your boards and how people say your boards are different and you don't see it. And then
Mhm.
you just gave me a compliment. And I was just hanging out with my friend Hannah the other day and she said the same compliment. I don't see that, right? I don't know if I
Yeah.
will ever see that, which is fine. But how do I get myself to believe it or believe I'm not believing in something? I think what happened is doing this podcast, there's a lot of work that goes behind it, like a lot of physical building work. but a lot of emotional work. You know, we were just talking
Yeah.
about self-doubt and moving through those emotions where I haven't had the time for me as a person, in my opinion, to show up the way I want to show up. And I think
Right.
moving forward now, I got a good grasp, and I'm super glad that I spent the year like trying this out because now I feel like I now have a good grasp. Like I trust the ship, I trust the waves, I trust that we're going to on this destination. Like let me watch the sunset. You know what I mean? Like let me see the
Mhm.
fucking dolphins flip over. Like let me make out with a hot boy. Like let me now have fun. And I feel like if I start getting into that pocket of having fun, then I will see it. I will get that spark, and then I feel like it will make it more complete. I feel like I'm still not complete. I'm still not there. I feel like the reason why I'm still not there is because I'm too much in my head, and I need to let go and just have fun. And I think that's what I want to do in the next couple of years. My 30s, I want to have fun, and then with this podcast, I just want to have fun. And I feel like in the world, we are not having fun anymore. I feel like everything has to be a destination. It has to be a point. It has to be this. It has to be that. And like, are we not having fun though? Like, I'm not having fun either. Like, let's all talk about how we're not having fun together so we can start having fun. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think there's a place for both. I think there's a place to talk about how we're not having fun,
Mhm,
but I also think like, and I'll just speak for myself, not for anybody else, but like the majority of the reason that I'm not having as much fun as I want to be having
mhm,
is because yeah, exactly like you said, I don't see in myself what other people see in me.
mhm,
And what's stopping that from happening like, is loving myself.
mhm,
Right. And I think loving myself with nature versus nurture, the way, things went in my life. I have things, and I think this is just the human experience. It happens to everybody, right? Is we have things that we repress
yeah,
because we acted in a way outside of our values and we don't think we're worthy of fighting for those values anymore. And I'm way oversimplifying it when I say it, but
mhm,
that's what it feels like for me is that I haven't forgiven myself for things in my past
mhm,
to just like let go and say, you know what, like you deserve good things. Like let's let them come. Let's receive them when they're here. Cause I mean, I do see that there are great things here.
mhm,
But if the story that I tell myself in my head, and sometimes it's nonverbal, right?
mhm,
Like sometimes there's no words behind it. But if I'm telling myself a story that I don't deserve this, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not good,
mhm,
like you're not going to be able to be happy.
mhm,
I, and so I think that, yeah, how do we figure out how to do that? I can't tell you, but
mhm,
I know that I know that this journey and like doing the business is what one of the things I've learned in the last year is here's this giant table. That was my biggest project ever, right? I'm my biggest project by a long shot,
yes,
right? Like
yes, that's
my business is going to rise to the level of the work that I do on myself. And I'm trying to not give a fuck what people
yeah,
see.
yeah.
But I also hope that by other people seeing where I came from to where I know I'm going to get, I just don't know how yet,
Mhm,
that also helps people along.
mhm. I love what you just said about like you are the biggest project, and I think that this is why I love talking about my feelings to people because they regurgitate it back in a way. I'm like, oh damn, because my
It's a different
therapist would say the
perspective.
same thing. I can't. She would be like, anytime I'm dealing with something, my weight or my appearance or my self image, she will always be like, well, can you, for example, like I want to like I have a good friend that has good style. I'm like, I want to have good style, right? But if I'm being honest, the reason why I don't have the style that I want is because I feel like I need to have the body that I need to have it, like, the hot, sexy body in order to have the style. And I think in my 30s, I'm ready to get rid of that belief. I'm ready to break down those false beliefs that you have to once again look a certain way in order
Mhm.
to have the dream life that you want. And I think that's what I'm doing in order for me to be happy and have more fun is to get rid of these things that I'm holding myself back. Like no one told me that you have to be a six pack in order to wear this stuff. You can do it. And so I love that analogy that you are you are the biggest project because I feel like as soon as I started working on myself, this podcast came out of the woodwork. And I don't think I
Mhm.
would be here if I didn't start working on myself. And every single time I self doubt myself and get myself out of it, my podcast gets bigger. Every time I'm like, well, I don't know if I can edit. And then I edit. Oh, I don't know if I can do an intro. Then I do an intro. It's like every time I work on myself, my creative outlet becomes better. And I kind of, when I have friends that have kids, they say the same thing is like, I can't be the best mom if I'm not the best person. Like if I'm drowning in whatever it is, and so are my kids. So it's kind of like that. I always look at my podcast as a baby and kind of like relate it to something more tangible, like how parents are always like, I have to be a good parent mentally, physically, emotionally, in order to
Mhm.
produce the best child that I can produce. So I like that analogy that you said.
Yeah, that makes me think of I'm gonna have to find it for you and send it later. There's a song that's I think it's called like Casualty, but that it sums up all of what you just said, and I
Yes.
think it's worth reflecting on. But
Yes.
I can't think of the name, so never mind.
Yes. Well, I mean, that was all I needed. You have answered all my
Okay.
questions. I thank you for coming on my podcast, but don't hang up. I'm trying to just like exit it for editing.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell the people where they can find your work?
Sure. Yeah. So my business is Bossmansboutique and
Mhm.
custom woodworking. Slight caveat: I may be going away from custom for a little bit,
That's
some more
fine.
trying to artist thing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
at Bossmansboutique on Instagram.
I enjoyed our time. I felt like the time went by so fast. Like I was saying, I want to have fun. I feel like I'm finding it. I'm feeling like my fire is warming up. I'm like, okay. I need more of this. It's like I need more people. I need more people, and I feel like the more people I have, the better that this would be, and stuff like that. So thank you for always being my test subject and
Got it, man.
being down to help me. You know, help me with my first match. I would say.
You bet. I had a lot of fun.